Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You watch it on YouTube. Like button, subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, and it's AMPIRE. And don't forget, Tuesday night, 7:30 Eastern Time, Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Commanders, and I will be doing our live YouTube streaming session, whatever it is. Of course, right here is Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. We're going to be breaking down the Commanders' 19-13 win over the Atlanta Falcons. They are now, Nicki, 7-5.
Didn't see this coming. Did not see this coming when they were 1-4 and couldn't get the offense to do much of anything. They really turned it around. I mean, I give a lot of credit to Taylor Heinicke. Today he was a bit erratic. But Heinicke, that defense just looked solid. They were gashed a bit on the ground this week. But they keep coming up with big plays. And I think that's what matters the most, especially, in clutch situations.
And I think it was funny because I didn't want to start with Heinicke. I'll get to him in a minute, but I did think it was funny. Rivera was asked, how would you describe his game? He said it's Taylor. Yeah. Because it encompassed everything. There were a couple of big throws or a couple of throws where you start going like this.
Yeah.
The interception was horrible.
Oh my gosh.
But it was the full Taylor Heinicke experience. He did have a couple of big plays. But let's go to Brian Robinson first. Yes. 105 yards, first 100-yard game since in his career. But of course, he had the shooting incident earlier this summer, and just what a day for him. What did you think about his day?
I think he's really starting to show what he was built to be in this offense. I mean, he's a powerful back. I mean, he's built like a house, for one. The way he's shedding tackles, getting yards after the contact, I think that is really huge for this offense. And the way they use him in conjunction with the other backs, getting Curtis Samuel out in space, getting Antonio Gibson out in space, and using more of their dynamic playmakers. I think he's a really good complement. And I think he and Heinicke, just in their mobility, Heinicke's mobility, I think they're really starting to get the line to settle down. I think that the O-line is really playing well right now, and I think it's a credit to those two especially.
And I think, for me, a couple of things with him. One of the things, he's running with much more confidence. They all said that after the game. Yeah. That was a phrase we heard a few times.
Yeah.
But you see it in some of the runs where he bounces outside, and his ability to press the hole, but trust his vision to the outside, seeing what, drawing guys inside because he runs so hard inside that he now has the outside. But I love that when he bounces, when he turns, he gets his shoulders back square really fast. And so it enables him to then get those extra yards when he's on contact. And you don't always see other backs doing that. So, but the other thing is when you ask guys, what do those runs mean? Those runs, it's funny because I call them a big fella run, but they're really FU runs.
Yeah.
But what do you think this does for his teammates?
He was trucking guys. I mean, that gets guys fired up. This wasn't a run play, but it was a catch and run on his touchdown. Yeah. I mean, he ran through a guy, then dragged another defender with him into the end zone. And you look back at Taylor Heinicke, he's the most hype I've ever seen. I mean, he's screaming and yelling, and that's what it does for this group, is it really gets them going. Not to mention it's production. So yeah, I thought he had a really good game, and it was really cool to see, given what he had gone through in August.
Yeah. So. The last time I saw somebody get trucked like that was when they put out the pizzas for us on a Wednesday, and Ben Standig was going right over them. So that I haven't seen anybody try to get trucked like that in a while, but just kidding, Ben. But it's true. But I do think there's an impact on guys. Even asking Kendall Fuller in the press conference, a defensive player, and you ask him, they're like, "Oh man." Yeah. And it's just what it means to them. And it's just, there's a different energy that a guy like that can bring.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's kind of what the identity of this team has started to become. I think they're still kind of searching for it in full. But the way they rely on the run game to extend drives, but also that toughness, that scrappiness. I mean, that's what Taylor Heinicke is. That's what Brian Robinson is. Oh, he's just big and powerful. You look at the way their interior defensive line and Montez Sweat, but especially their interior guys, they're just so freaking strong and powerful. I think that's a lot of what this team has become, and that's where their strong points are.
And I also want to give a shout out or credit to the tight ends, because I thought the tight ends blocked really well today. Yeah. A couple of times on the slice blocks where they're coming behind the line after the play, taking out the ends, the backside.
John Bates.
I do, and I didn't think he had a good game last week against Houston, so I thought he did a nice job today. But
did you see him on the field pregame?
Well,
him and Cole were working on the blocks with Juan Castillo. They were out there I want to say like 3.5 hours early, just them two working with Juan Castillo.
Well, it paid off, and you saw Cole Turner on some of those blocks too, taking out the backside end. There was one run that I think it was Gibson had. It was a 6-yard run, but it was the way Bates was in line, goes and immediately blocks down, but then he bounces off because he knows the guy's taken and gets to the linebacker, and that little crease gave Gibson the room for a 6-yard run. That's the stuff that adds up, and it was a first down too, so that stuff adds up quite a bit.
How much do you think it is a byproduct of Heinicke buying them shoes? They got shoes last week, promised the running back shoes this week. They produced, what, 170-something yards? So,
I mean,
give the whole team shoes.
I was going to say,
Tressway deserves one. The defense deserves one.
Tressway deserves a golden
shoe.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's what he gets. But you know, it's funny too, because when you look at the difference in these games, it's not that great. I mean, what is this? Tennessee at the 2-yard line, Chicago at the 1-yard line. This game down there, they've won 2 of those. Can you explain why? I mean,
no, it's interesting. I mean, again, Heinicke was all over the place today, but I think just his presence, what he brings, his mobility, settling down the line, relying more on the run game. And then I think the defense, the way it's really developed in the secondary has really complemented the pass rush. And we heard Kendall Fuller say that today, after his game-sealing interception, he went up to Daron Payne, and Payne says, "When I eat, you eat." Right. And that's really what it is. They've kind of sealed that defense, and that's become the leading force for this team.
They have, and I think what's impressive too is they lost Benjamin St. Jude, and Christian Holmes comes in. You don't even notice him because he didn't do anything.
He had the face mask.
Well,
but overall, they played really well together. I really like that secondary. There's good young pieces, but also some really good veterans that help them along.
And what I really like about them is I think they're like kids in the playground. They play well together. But I think that's important. And there were a couple examples, even against Houston, where you see them communicating before the snap. And I remember talking to somebody, like, there was a play where they weren't sure what to do. They didn't get the signal, so they called their own signal, and it just so happened that it meshed with what they said. But it was one of those, if we're going to be wrong, we're all going to be wrong. Right. And so you can actually maybe be right by doing that. Right. But it was really the ability to communicate that jumped out. Right. And that's a huge key, but they really do play well together.
And they're also versatile. I mean, a lot of the reason they're able to do what they do is because you got Keim who can pretty much play every position on defense outside of D tackle, probably. He's down in the box, he's at the line, he's safety, corner, nickel, whatever you need. But they're getting Derek Force on the field more, largely because you can move Bobby McCain down to nickel if you need him. So I think having guys that you can mix and match creates different looks for the offense, but also allows them to do more things to get more of their playmakers on the field out there.
And I think it's funny because all the talk about linebacker depth, what happens? It's one of those two. Cole Holcomb's been out for a while. Yeah. And I know John Bostic, everybody likes to rip. The guys filled in pretty well. And there were a couple plays against Houston where you got to play it better. We get that. Everybody's going to have that. There are things he doesn't do well. We know that, but it hasn't. I mean, they've been winning.
Yeah. And I think again, a large part of that is having guys like Keim who are just. I mean, he can be a linebacker or a safety depending on the play, and he moves around interchangeably within the same series. You can move him up to the line. He's a hard hitter, but he can cover. I mean, you don't find guys like that all the time.
Do you think he cares if it's called a linebacker or a safety?
As long as he's getting paid, probably.
There you go, and he'll get paid pretty soon. Let's stick with the defense too, because they did get gashed a couple times. That's a really good run offense. I mean, the Falcons can run very well.
And their play calls really good, really savvy play calling there.
And I liked what there are a couple of times what they do. They're double teaming the tackles, and the linebackers are freezing. So thinking it might be a play action, and it creates these big lanes in the middle. But still overall, they came up big when they needed it. And Daron Payne again doing that. Like, what about the kind of year he's having? It's been an
incredible year. Good timing too, as in a contract year.
Funny how that works.
But him and John Allen together. I mean, you go back to that 4th and 1 prime example. They doubled him practically, but he was able to kind of launch off the tackle, get his arms up, and then grab the guy to bring him down. So yeah, I think those two have just kind of been the drivers of this defense. And Montez Sweat is really playing off of them well. I like the way they coordinate their stunts. I think kind of like the secondary, those three play well together. And then yeah, going back to this offseason, we were talking about, do they have the depth at end? Look at Casey Toohill coming alive out there. And James Smith-Williams, he's been sick this week, but he's kind of that perfect complement on the other end. It'll be interesting to see what happens when Chase Young comes back, if Chase Young comes back. But yeah, I think they're just really playing well.
They are, and I think it's funny though, he got burned by that zone read a couple times, and several times it was James Smith-Williams' side. Now I know one time he definitely crashed his hard in the run. A couple other times he got responsibility, and I don't think they were expecting that one.
Yeah.
Do you?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there were gashes throughout. I mean, I thought there were a couple busted coverages, I think. A lot of missed tackles. John Allen had a glaring missed tackle. There were issues in both phases. And special teams, you think about Joey Slice and this extra point. But I think they do enough well now to where they can limit their mistakes and overcome the really bad ones.
Well, I mean, penalties, not getting a lot of penalties outside, and so there are little things that they're doing. And while Taylor had the turnover, they've been very good, mostly taking care of the ball. So I do want to go to Taylor now and just, last week they made the big thing that he's going to stay at quarterback. Well, I don't know how much really a decision it was because Carson Wentz wasn't even active today. So I didn't even know that was a possibility. But when you watch games like this, and do you sometimes wonder how would this look with Carson in there? And how long do you just continue to roll with Heinicke?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder, and then I'm like, oh, right, no. Yeah, definitely Heinicke all the way. They're 5-1 with the guy. The team believes in him. He is making some big plays. He makes some dumb ones, which he admits to. But he's getting the offense moving. And I think Carson obviously has a big arm. He's that perfect mold physically for a quarterback, but he can't escape the pocket, can't extend plays, can't extend drives. And that's what I think this group needs. That's what I think the line needs. And it starts with the line. So I just think I don't know that you could go back to Wentz. We'll see if if things trail off really badly and, they want to get one last look at what they have, or even turn to like the rookie. But I think right now it's Well, I think right now there's only one guy.
And that's the thing. That's the conundrum, because I know there's going to be the divide on Heinicke. The Rorschach test. Yeah. The fans are going to see all the good plays it is. The other one's going to see the interception, which again was a bad decision. Really bad decision. He
called it a boneheaded play. I just absolutely should not have done that.
And that's okay. It's okay. But that's the thing with Wentz that I do wonder if you put him in the situation where you have the run game working the way it is. But do they call the game the same way because you have him?
Right.
Early in the season, they weren't. I think by going to Heinicke, it's forced him to stick with the run and be committed to the run. So there's one thing with that. But then if you do stay committed to the run with Wentz, how would it look? And again, I don't think they're going to get there because you're going to roll with the hot hand, and the players certainly seem to want that.
Yeah, they're winning, and I think that's all that matters. I mean, they've had games like today where it's like, oof, a couple different results on a couple of plays. It would have been much different, but they're getting it done.
And I'm sticking with Wentz for one more thing, because if you want to, and again, I just know they've always felt like he's got the higher ceiling, of course, in his offense. So if that's the case, if you I don't think they're changing that, and I don't think you should, because you are Ron Rivera seems to be the creature of habit, and if he knows it's rolling, he knows the temperature of the locker room. But it is to go, if you're going to go far, can you do it? But here's the other problem with Wentz. He forces those throws too.
Right.
So it's not like he's Alex Smith the way he takes care of the ball. He forces all that stuff. So
and that's what the wash is for me. The downside of Heinicke is, probably size, sometimes can't see over the rush, can't get the ball as far as Wentz can, obviously, and makes those plays where you're like, oh boy. But Wentz did it more. Yes, he was new to the offense and new to the team, but I feel a little bit more comfort with Heinicke out there than Wentz does. How they look at him in the future. I mean, he's got no more guaranteed money. Do they try to? He doesn't have much leverage as a starting quarterback, so they could try to redo something if they wanted to keep him around for a little bit longer. But right now I just don't see any upside in changing.
And I think the other thing with Wentz that we don't know is where's he at in this offense, because that was one of the issues early, that he wasn't quite as comfortable because, he hadn't had a lot of time at what level he'd be at. And I know, like they talked about, he's getting more comfortable with it behind the game. And I think the matchups are conducive to sticking with this.
No, absolutely. And I think so long as
Right. But the playoffs are real.
Very real, very real. I mean, I think back to 2020 when it got down to a minuscule, or kind of all fell apart in December. Like, you stick with what's working the best.
Right. And then in the playoffs,
sure.
very much a lot. What do you think that this formula can sustain it? And when you look at the upcoming schedule, I mean, Cowboys.
Yeah. No, I mean it's going to be a tough run, but I do think the style into the run, and they got dynamic playmakers who hopefully they can stay healthy enough to keep at least a few of them in there. But yeah, I do think it's sustainable. I feel like this defense has been tested more than the defense in, say, 2020. Yeah. When they went on that run, beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, it felt like Pittsburgh was kind of a hollow team. I feel like this team knows more about what it is and what it wants to be. And I think that's the biggest thing.
And I think they just kind of know they're going to find a way to get it done. It's funny, going back to Robinson, one more thing with the run game, because that will be the key going forward, is one of the things he talked about. Like, he is getting back to where he was and what he thought he could do, but it's that second level run. And so you start to see a few more of those 10, 12-yard runs, because he said that early on he was just worried about getting past the first level. And now that he is, his concern is getting past the second level. And so you're now looking at it differently. You could see on some of the runs like that. So he's going to be a huge key going forward. And I also think it's amazing, Nicki, when you look at the line and the shuffling and the tight ends in and out, that it's like it's starting to seem cohesive. Maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, even in the early going, I thought Taylor had like a lot of time. He had that perfect, beautiful pocket. So I was like gawking. I'm like, oh, that's such a pretty pocket. But they do look good. They're holding up. And even today with Trey Turner dealing with an injury, we'll see how he is next week. But they're holding up.
Last thing, Ron Rivera's 100th career win that includes playoffs and all that. And early in the year, 1-4, a lot of griping among a lot of people, fan base, a lot of people wondering about his future. What have you seen in him during this period that's allowed them to get to where they are? In addition to the run game and all that, but there's still something that he's going to find.
Yeah, I think Kendall Fuller kind of hit on it. I think he's remained even keeled. Once you get past the quarterback moment, right, where he gave that answer of what's different, and he's like quarterback, and that went nuts. Since then, he's remained very even keeled, and he's the kind of guy that this team especially needs, because he does a really good job of kind of pushing out the noise outside, the drama with the ownership and everything that comes with that. He does a good job of just kind of keeping the players focused on the game and what they need to do. And they've said that multiple times, but I think that's something that can't be overstated here, because it's unlike any other organization what they've had to deal with. So
there's a lot that you have to block the noise to keep away from the players and all that. The other thing is too, when you hear them, like I talked to one guy a couple weeks ago about how he is in the meetings, and like he's like, dude, the meetings are tremendous, and like I think there's a lot of energy he provides them, because in his role he's a CEO here.
Yeah.
And you have the other guys doing the coordinator stuff, but he's a CEO, so you've got to set the tone, and that even keeled aspect has been, I think, pivotal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think just for the guys, just seeing a lot of what he was preaching in the early going come to fruition. A lot of it being small things, technique, rush lane discipline, preaching patience when, they had their first big win in Philly, and they come and, stay consistent and get that win in Houston. Again, here, they get another win. So I think once you start to see these things, come to fruition yourself, it's like to me, it's like, teenagers kind of rebelling against their parents and having to learn through the hard way of, oh, that's what they were saying,
Right.
So they're starting to see for themselves what he's been saying for years.
Kind of sound like you speak from experience on this.
As the teenager, yes, I was one of those.
Okay.
Sorry, Mom.
But also with him too, I think early on too, I think the feeling was if they just start doing this, we'll be okay.
Yes,
That was what he would say. And I think when you're in a situation that can be as chaotic as this place can be, to have a calm voice is really, really pivotal.
Yeah.
All right. So before the game, they did the Sean Taylor Memorial installation, not a statue. It wasn't a statue, and it doesn't look like a statue. All the aside from whatever people think of the memorial installation, you were there and talked to some family members and all that, and people down there. What did they think about the day?
Yeah, I think you can see it. You see it mostly in Jackie Taylor, his daughter's face, and she's been. I can't even imagine what it's like from her standpoint, because it's always, whenever there's something like this, it's always a reminder that he's gone, and you can see the emotion. She was tearing up during the whole unveiling, but she looked very moved, and I think it's something that has touched the entire family. Like his younger brother Gabe Taylor, who's at Rice. Yeah, he's a defensive back at Rice. He's going to be coming up for the draft maybe in a year or two. So for him to go through this process as a football player himself, kind of look at it through the eyes of his older brother, and to see all this, you could tell it was incredibly moving for them. A lot of tears up there.
And it's weird for me because I know you weren't here at that time, but I was on the beat, of course, when all that stuff happened. And I just, you get that day where he dies, and it was just very surreal. Yeah. And it was surreal for the area, surreal being out at the building, seeing the impact. I mean, you're out there. People have to understand, we know these players. Like, we didn't have great relationship with Sean because Sean was a very, you had to earn his trust. And I know at the media, we were the last ones on the list who were earning that. Greg Williams, his defense coordinator, would say it took him a while to earn that trust. So it was really weird. But I do remember, I loved watching the guy play because the way they used him. And I think one of the things that was hard for me, I remember going up to Greg Williams after it happened. And it's like, I got to tell you how much I enjoyed watching how you guys use it. It was hard to say because there's taken from anybody involved in this whole thing. It's a human being losing their life. It's gonna affect you. But I remember that whole day was just surreal because we went to bed the night that before he died, we went to bed thinking he was probably gonna be okay because we got this update from Vince Serrato, and it sounded like it was trending well. Then you get a call at 5:30 or 6 saying he died. And so it was really it was very surreal and very it was really weird to go in the locker room and see the locker a couple days later. It's it's hard to even describe what it's like now, but it's, but do you get a sense from what he's meant to this area? And you've only been here for years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the adoration of Sean Taylor, you see the 21 jerseys out there. You see the way they welcome his family when they come in. Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. And the players too. I mean, Landon Collins, I thought, was the biggest Sean Taylor fan to come through. And they all know his game. They know what he did. And they probably won't be able to replicate it, in part because rules have changed, but also he's just that good of a player. But I think it's evident throughout the stadium, anytime they do something like this, how impactful he was.
Nicki, tell people where they can find your stuff.
You can find me at WashingtonPost.com or on Twitter, Nicki Jhabvala, one word. There you go.
There you go. And by the way, the one thing I would hope with this organization, the last word for me, is that you need to start retiring Darryl Green, all those other guys that really helped build this, because that's long overdue as well. Anyway, that's it for me. Commanders win 19-13. I'll be back on Tuesday night, the live stream YouTube edition with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, again, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. There you go. Tune in, and I'll talk to you next time.